to Getting Sketchy Live, brought to you by thevirtualinstructor.com, featuring artists Matt Fussell and Ashley Hurst. And now, let's get sketchy.
Hello there, everyone. Matt here with thevirtualinstructor.com, and welcome to Getting Sketchy Live here. I'd like to welcome everyone on YouTube who's watching this live, and also those of you who are watching this sometime in the future. Of course, I'm glad to have you along with myself and my good friend and fellow artist and art teacher, Ashley Hurst. Getting Sketchy is where we try to create a drawing within a time frame, and boy, it can be very difficult to do that, and I have quite a challenge tonight. Tonight, I'm going to be doing the drawing. We're going to be using ballpoint pens. I'm going to use a black ballpoint pen on regular old drawing paper to try to draw, yes, another challenging subject here, but we'll get to that in just a minute. First of all, I'd like to welcome Ashley Hurst with us. Ashley, how are you doing?
I'm doing great tonight, Matt. I'm looking forward to seeing what you draw, and thank you guys for being out there with us tonight. I see a lot of familiar names in the chat. And so just make sure you put your questions, if you have them, for Matt and I in capital letters, and we'll be sure to see them.
Yeah, and Ashley's manning the chat box tonight. So if you do have a question that's directed specifically at myself or Ashley, it can be anything art related. It doesn't have to be what we're doing tonight. Of course, you can put those questions and comments in the chat box. And if you put them in all capital letters, since the chat box does get rolling pretty quickly, that'll help us see it amongst all of the other questions and comments. Getting Sketchy is brought to you by thevirtualinstructor.com, where we have a ton of drawing and painting lessons. We have a fantastic membership program, which includes video courses, which have videos and step-by-step illustrated ebooks, weekly live lessons. In fact, after tonight's broadcast, Ashley and I are going to be heading over to the Virtual Instructor. We're not actually going anywhere, but we're going to be broadcasting live over at the Virtual Instructor, where I am continuing work on a realistic graphite drawing of my daughter. And I had planned on showing it to you tonight, but I didn't bring it over here, so I guess we won't be doing that tonight. But if you want to learn more about our program, there's a link under the description or in the description below this video. You can check it out. Everyone starts with a week-long trial for free. So if you want to join us a little over an hour from now for our live lesson, you can do that tonight if you want to. If you want to check out 3 of our course videos and ebooks for free, you can do that as well. There's another link in the video or in the description below this video that you can go check out 3 of our course videos and ebooks for free. Now, don't do that stuff yet because we're getting ready to go into the broadcast tonight. And part of Getting Sketchy for this series anyway, or this season, is we are breaking down Ashley and I's top 5 artists of all time. We both made lists. And our lists are slightly different. We have one artist that is on both of our lists, and we haven't got to that artist yet. And we're not going to get to that artist tonight, but tonight's artist is mine. Ashley, will you remind us who your artist was last week?
Yes, my artist last week was Salvador Dali, the surrealist from the 20th century, you might recall. He worked with double images and dreams and dream analysis.
And tonight, my artist is Rembrandt van Rijn. We all have probably heard of Rembrandt. Rembrandt, of course, was a Dutch artist. He was not just a painter, he was also an excellent draftsman or drawer, and also a very accomplished printmaker. He covered a wide range of subjects, including landscapes, portraits, animals, and biblical scenes. But Rembrandt wasn't just an artist. He was also an art lover and collected and actually dealt art. It's believed that Rembrandt created over 300 paintings, 300 etchings and other types of prints, and well over 2,000 drawings during his life. There is, of course, some debate on whether or not all of Rembrandt's works were indeed Rembrandt's. Rembrandt was a great teacher, and his students would often work alongside him in his studio. Because he developed essentially a pseudo art school, many of his students' works were once believed to be his, although some art historians have started to sift through all that and discovered that some of the artworks that we believed were Rembrandt's were actually works of his students.
Now, we do know that the later works were all his because he kind of fell out of favor and into poverty. So you can enjoy his later works and know that nobody else touched them.
And there's even still some speculation over many of his works on whether or not they are indeed actually his. So there's still speculation going on today. So my number 3 is Rembrandt van Rijn. And next week we'll be revealing Ashley's number 2. Want to give us any hints on that?
Okay, let's see. How about this artist's work took a little longer than he planned? I just made that up off the top of my head. You'll probably guess.
Okay, that's a pretty good hint there. If you think you know what Ashley's number 2 is on the list, you can put it in the chat box. Last week, somebody got figured yours out.
They did. They guessed my hint.
Or it was 2 weeks ago.
I think my hints need to be a little harder.
And I, of course, am not giving hints away. So, all right. Well, I think we're ready to get into the drawing portion of tonight's broadcast. We are doing a challenging subject, as I mentioned before, and I'm going to be working with ballpoint pens. So let's go ahead and transition over to the main camera. All right, so we don't need the timer quite yet, so we'll hide that for now. But over here on the left side of your screen, you can see what is called a Cape buffalo or an African buffalo. What an interesting animal. It looks like he or she has just taken their horns and just given themselves a feather haircut.
We're going to start is it a male or female because it has horns talk again.
Yes, I should tell you all, if you haven't figured it out, I love everything there is about nature and biology, but I have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about when it comes to animal species. I will try to describe the different parts on this animal here as I go through the process, but I will describe them in terms of art and not in terms, I might say this little thingy right here, so on. So please, if you are a biologist or an expert in the field of Cape buffalo, you can correct me all you want, but
he'll probably forget.
I'll probably forget.
It looks like you guys are guessing my artist like crazy in the chat, so I'm pretty ashamed I gave it away with a poor hint.
Well,
I'm not going to say it out loud.
Well, there's only a few left. So if you've been watching all of these episodes, you probably got it down to at least 1 or 2. I see William Turner is, Joseph Ballard William Turner is on this. Somebody mentioned that here, and that is a great. He wasn't on either one of our lists.
No,
but
that's true.
It's a good suggestion.
I'm ashamed I didn't pick him.
All right. So anyway, I'm going to be working with just standard ballpoint pens here. I mean, I went and got these at the drugstore today. They're everywhere. And this is what I actually love to draw with. You don't know this about, some of you don't know this about Ashley and I, but we went to the same church growing up. And there were 3 or 4 of us, maybe 5 of us that sat together at the back of the very back row of the balcony. And occasionally we'd have ushers come in and tell us to be quiet. And do you remember all that?
Yeah, I do. And it wasn't for talking. It was for snickering.
Yes.
Because we would make drawings the whole time.
We would draw the whole time. We would draw people in the church sometimes, and then we would pass the drawings back and forth and, laugh at them. And we had a lot of fun up there. And it was always with ballpoint pens on the little...
Sure, they had them available to fill out the visitors cards, so we always had art supplies.
So we always put those to good use here. So honestly, I haven't drawn with a ballpoint pen in a really long time. I think there might be one lesson on the site drawing with ballpoint pen, but you're going to have to search really hard to find it because I don't even know what it was. But that's what I'm using tonight. So I am extremely nervous because this subject over here is not easy. There's a lot of things going on here. And of course, the ballpoint pens are unforgiving. I'm not going to do a pencil underdrawing or anything. I'm going to dive right in with the ink.
Every mark counts tonight.
Every mark counts. But, these pens do really allow you to create somewhat of a range of value here by adjusting the pressure on it. Mm-hmm. So they're not like regular ink pens that you would do a pen and ink drawing with. There is a little bit of forgiveness in them. So I'm not totally crazy, but I am borderline crazy. So I'm just going to take some initial measurements here. I have actually off screen over here, I have this image a little bit larger. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually be holding the pen up, and I'm going to be using it as a measuring stick. So I'm going to be holding it out, and I'm going to get basic proportions by measuring it. Now, this is not something that you're going to see, but I'm going to go ahead and start and just take a couple of basic measurements to make sure that I can fit the entire drawing on the paper, and then I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer. So this is about, the width of the pen is about how wide from horn to horn my drawing's going to be. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer there so that you see the drawing a little bit closer.
Matt, your pen has a white tip on the back side. That's not an eraser, is it? I know that some ballpoint pens come with erasers now.
A white tip.
Was that?
Oh no, it's just plastic.
I'm sorry.
It probably was just really shiny.
Yeah, maybe that's what it was.
Yeah,
it's the shadow.
This came in like a pack of 30 pens, and it was like $2 or something. So these are
the kind of supplies we can
pens
afford
I've
to use.
ever used.
Right.
Yes. All right. I think we're ready to start the timer now. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on the timer, and I'm going to get started. So the first measurement I'm going to make here, as I've already done, is just from horn to horn, from the edge of one horn to the other. So I'm just going to go ahead and get an idea of where that's going to be on the paper. Maybe we'll move it up a little bit higher there. And then, of course, there's the other side. Now, because I am using the pen, the measure, and I'm using a very consistent measuring stick, if you will, now I'm going from the top of the horn down to the bottom of the chin. I'm trying to get it as accurate as possible, but it's still kind of a little bit, it's not perfectly exact, but at least gives me a little bit of a starting point. So this is from the top of the horn down to the bottom of the chin. Now, not only is this the top of the horn, but if you'll look, the tops of the horns kind of line up with the edges of the horns too on either side. So I can kind of draw a little bit of a straight line across there, and it's going to give me an idea of where the horn's going to curl back.
Yeah, the top of those horns are pretty even with the top of the head, aren't they? That's handy.
Yeah, that is. Now I'm going to be measuring the width of the head here.
Got a couple comments. I'll go ahead and start from the chat. Judith has a comment that's been on the board for a little bit. Just an interesting fact about one of Rembrandt's paintings, about the story behind the medical student. I did not know that the man that was being dissected had to have been a convicted criminal. I guess they earned the right to have their bodies taken apart as part of their punishment in the afterlife. I don't know. Sounds crazy, but I did not know that. So that's a good information to have. There's all kinds of different laws in the old world about dissecting cadavers. So thanks for that, Judith. I appreciate that. Let's see. Sherry Scott has a comment. Matt, have you considered gel pens? Sherry finds them to be a little more controllable than a regular ballpoint pen. Or easier to manage, she says.
No, I have only white. I only have a white gel pen, really. And I have only used it once or twice to try to create highlights and haven't been very successful with that. So, in black and white drawings, pretty much. So,
me too. I've only used the white one myself. I'll have to pick up a black one and see how it compares to these very cheap Bic or Papermate pens that I'm used to using.
Okay, so what I've got here is I've taken a measurement from the top of the head to the bottom of the chin. I've also taken a measurement for the width of the head here across the eye line. So the eyes are approximately here. And then I've also measured from horn to horn, of course. And we know that the top of the horn lines up with where it curls around. And on this side, the bottom of the ear lines up with the edge of the horn. And over here, it's just a little bit further outside. So I don't really need to take another measurement. I'm not going to spend all night looking at this beast here. Well, I am, but I'm not going to spend all night using the pen to find measurements. I'm just kind of getting some of my initial measurements in place. And this is where the snouts are. See, there we go. The nostrils on the snout.
I like snout.
Are going to be.
The nose. These early measurements are so crucial. In some ways, this is where the art's happening, the analysis of the subject. After that, it's kind of going through the motions with shapes and values. Big Blue Minamiku. Hello from Nottingham, UK. Big Blue says one of his favorite artists is Boris Vallejo. I think I'm pronouncing that last name right. It sounds right to me. And I actually would agree with that. Boris Vallejo is an illustrator, works with fantasy subject, and is a real master of the oil painting process. And he works from sort of a base layer up or an underpainting, a lot like the old masters, actually. So thanks for that. He's not on my list, but he could have been.
Okay, so you can see this triangular shape that I drew right here. This is basically for the bridge of the snout, we'll call it, that comes down, because I know the nostrils are right here. It kind of flattens out a little bit, and then we've got kind of the top part of the snout here. So I've kind of got some good basic measurements in place. Now I can kind of start kind of filling in all of the rest of the information. So I'm going to start up here with the top of the horn, and we'll just start with this little bit of a curve there, and then I'm going to come out on this side too. I'm not going to draw the entire horn yet. I'm just going to kind of get those in place, and then I'm going to start working on where the eyes are located. And I know that one eye is over here on the right side. I'm going to try to get the distance between eye to eye.
You know, drawing with a pen with no pencil drawing, it's kind of like getting into a cold pool. You know, you just have to get in gradually, wade into your drawing.
Or get in all at once and just get it over with. But you can't do that with a pen. Okay, so I've got my first eye in place, and I know the second eye is going to be over here somewhere.
Chloe says, I'm new to your channel, but I like your guys' accent. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm glad you do.
Not everybody does.
I can't tell you how many people talk about my accent. And, you know, when I talk, I don't hear it, but when I listen to myself, I do hear it. Mm-hmm. And just be thankful you didn't hear me years ago, because it was much worse. But you know what? We all have different accents from where we come from. Even the people who say they don't have an accent, well, they do have an accent. I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer there. I think I've got a little bit more room to do so, since these eyes are relatively small. And I just realized I'm probably really far behind on where I need to be right now. I've been spending too much time on the measurements.
You've gotten some encouragement. Melody says, wow, this is pretty courageous, Matt. So there's that. No matter what happens with the drawing, Matt has demonstrated courage with his subject and his medium.
Well, that's how I roll. I just try to do it. You know, there is a very thin line between being completely insane and having courage, I guess.
Mm-hmm. If it works, it's courage.
Yeah,
if you pull it off, it was courage. Michael asks, is the music always on for Gettin' Sketchy?
It usually is, but I thought I turned it off, but I guess I didn't there. I'll turn it down and turn it off. There we go.
Okay, maybe that's better.
The music, some people like the music, some people don't. Of course, that's the way it is with everything.
We don't hear the music in the studio.
Yeah.
Had I known it was on, I would have tried to make sure all of the words I'm using rhyme at the end. But we'll try that next week. We'll try to speak in rhyme, maybe.
I don't know if that's going to happen.
Might be easier than drawing a Cape Buffalo with a ballpoint pen. Although, looks like a pretty good start so far.
Well, I hope everything's in the place it should be here. I'm going to just start pulling out a few details here and there. I know that the nostrils are right here, and I can kind of see that the inside corner of the eyes, if we come down a little bit, that nostril ends about right there. So now that I've got my initial comparisons in place, or my initial measurements, now I can start using those measurements to make comparisons with other parts of the subject here.
So we got some more questions coming in. I feel like the chat froze for a little bit and then started rolling again. So let's see if we can catch up a little. And if I've missed your question, you might type it again, because the chat did kind of roll quickly. So let's see. We've got, do you use a proportional divider for measurement? And this is from Hassan, or is just the pen fine? A proportional divider. Are you familiar with that tool, Matt? I
am, and I don't use one. I know a lot of people do. It's kind of it's you're still just making measurements. So I'm one of those folks, and I think Ashley is too, that you should use whatever works for you and whatever gets you the end result that you're after.
Yeah, sometimes I use my pen like Matt was demonstrating, and sometimes I actually do it with a ruler so I can see marks on there and see what the ratio between two measurements is a little bit more accurately. I just usually try to think about the ratios in fractions. Is one measurement half or a third or a quarter of another? That's the way I talk to myself when I'm using my pen as a measuring tool.
How do you talk to yourself when you're not using a pen as a measuring tool?
Well, I guess the same way. I just talk to myself about different things quietly, very quietly.
Okay, so I'm working down to the bottom of the chin here, and I'm just kind of looking at the shapes of darker and lighter value, and just kind of blocking them in really quickly here using mostly hatching.
Let's see. Do you ever give up on a drawing? This is from Mrs. Robsden, I believe, or Miss Robsdan. Do you ever give up on a drawing or just keep fiddling around, trying to correct your mistakes and maybe even go with some of those mistakes? I would say probably there's probably always mistakes in there from the artist's point of view, but like you mentioned before, if you keep fiddling around with it, they may kind of melt into or dissolve into your drawing.
Yeah, I don't know if giving up on a drawing is the right way to look at it. I typically tend to finish every drawing that I start these days. You can see the ink's kind of globbing up right there, so we're going to have a little bit of a dark area. But I do have drawings that I don't feel like are as successful as they should be or could be, but I don't necessarily give up in the drawing process in the middle of the process. I feel like you should give every drawing that you start a chance, because there have been lots of drawings that I've started, and during the process I've gotten discouraged and wanted to stop, but I plowed through, and then in the end everything kind of works out. But if I would have stopped, I would have never got to that point. So I don't know if I would encourage anyone to give up on a drawing.
So stick with it and see how it turns out. I think that's good advice.
And this pen is really starting to show why they were, this pen's not designed for drawing, of course. It's designed for writing, but it is globbing up every once in a while.
I've had that experience too when I'm drawing with a ballpoint pen. I know there are some nicer, more expensive ballpoint pens out there, but where's the challenge in that? Sometimes when I get a glob,
Do
on
they
my
sell those at
ballpoint
the
pen-
drugstore?
I don't think so. I think you probably have to order those, and the ones that I've seen online are like a longer stylus. They're clearly not for not a cheap writing pen, but they do have a ball on the tip. I wish I could tell you more about those. I've only used the cheap ones myself, but sometimes I'll have an extra piece of paper and just kind of lay the pencil or the pen rather at a low angle and just kind of roll the tip of it a little bit and clean off any excess ink that's built up around the roller ball.
Okay, so now I'm just pulling down a little bit of the contour or the outer line of the side of our Cape Buffalo here. And I'm going to start pulling down a few hatching marks to start developing some of the darker value that exists on the right side of the head here. Looks like our dominant light source is coming from the left.
Yeah, pretty strong contrast in here. I mean, a good way to look at this head is just to try to divide the values to begin with in half, maybe just the light and the dark, or maybe in 3, light, medium, and dark.
You know, this pen is pretty blobby, but at least it's consistent with its blobbiness.
Mm-hmm. Just part of the medium. Melody asks, what paper are you using? That's a good question.
This is Strathmore 400 series drawing paper.
Okay. So it's probably got a little bit more of a tooth to it than your standard printer paper, and it's probably good for ballpoint pen. It keeps the ball rolling, so to speak.
Yeah.
Ava Leonardo says, hello from the Philippines. Hi, Ava. Glad you're with us.
I haven't looked at the time, but I feel like I'm going slower than I need to be.
Should we tell him? You've got 30 minutes.
Okay.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, that's not great. I don't even have the ears or the horns in place yet.
Yeah, these minutes are pretty precious when you're drawing this way. Hope you guys are out there drawing along with us tonight.
Okay, we're going to start bringing some value and tone on this side here. But what's happening here in my mind is as I'm getting some of these initial bits of information in place, I'm feeling more confident about where everything needs to be, and then it's going to hopefully allow me to move a little bit faster here.
So he's almost in the pool. He's almost all the way in at this point.
I am not all the way in. I am in the. I'm on the third step. That's the worst part too, because you're just getting up to the part just beyond your bathing suit.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
It's really the lighter values that you have to be so careful with a ballpoint pen. You know, with your pressure. So those darker values are a little more forgiving.
Well, the contrast in this image is pretty important too, between the darker values and the lighter values in the foreground. You see those darker areas just behind the head, where the rest of the body is.
Yeah, that really helps the horns stand out.
Yeah. So I really want to get to that part.
We've got a question from Chloe Franklin. So I've been studying more into human anatomy, and I was wondering if should I study anatomy by section or just try to study it all as a whole? That's a good question. I studied anatomy a little bit, as much as was required when I was in art school, and I would say as a whole, probably, because we want to see how the body's parts work together. And I'll be honest, mostly the anatomy for artists that I kind of studied really just had to do mostly with bones and muscles, and it was just the big muscles, not the muscles that hold your rotator cuff in place, but rather like the deltoid muscles that are on top of that. So I don't know that studying smaller sections, you might actually go a little deeper than what is necessary for artist anatomy. And then some artists don't study anatomy at all. They just feel like that by capturing the light and shadow in the right places according to their observation, they don't need an anatomical knowledge. But if you're going to be working out of your imagination, doing figure drawing somewhat out of imagination, I'm thinking like a la comic book artists, then we're having a pretty solid understanding of the forms that you're dealing with regards to the human body, I think is pretty valuable.
Yeah, that's where that stuff really comes in handy, is when you are drawing from your imagination. It's helpful to know if you're looking at a subject and you're not really sure what's happening, or the shadows are kind of not telling you the truth. Then you can kind of have a better feel of what's happening there if you're with your knowledge of what's underneath the skin. I think just some general knowledge is probably good for most people. Don't have to be an expert or anything.
All right, let's see. Hosem says, I can't comment in the chat. I've got good news for you. Looks like you just did. It must be working now. So I'm not sure what's been going on with the chat. It will roll quickly on my screen and then kind of freeze for a little bit. And you maybe that's what you were experiencing. You might have been commenting, I don't know, and it just wasn't coming up. But it looks like it's coming in now.
Okay, now I'm going to start moving on to the first horn here, and it looks like it comes down a little bit below this eye. So I'm going to bring it down below the eye just slightly.
And Hosem had another question that I can see now, so let's address that. How can you draw small things without mistakes? When I try doing that, my hands start to shake and I ruin the drawing. Matt's actually talked about this a little bit, the larger you draw your subject, the smaller you have to draw those details. So if it's getting really, really tight, I'm thinking of small drawings of hands. When I can't really delineate those fingers, then I probably don't need to, or I need to just draw larger. So you might give, try to increase the dimensions of your artwork and see if that solves your problem and makes your details a little bit easier to get into. Drink less coffee. That's a problem I have. My hands do shake. I do love caffeine. I love it. And in fact, I've had about 6 or 7 cups of coffee today. And sometimes I can tell that it's actually affecting my temperament, and I can't settle down enough to draw those small things like what you're talking about. I'm not accusing you of drinking 6 or 7 cups of coffee, but I've had the same experience sometimes in the mornings while I'm really awake. I think I need to be a little bit tired to draw well.
And also, there's nothing wrong with having sketchier lines either.
It's true.
You don't have to. I mean, you get a lot of control actually from being looser. And I know that might seem counterintuitive, but sometimes the looser you are, the more the better chance you have of finding the right line, I like to say. So,
do you think it's because you're holding your pencil with less pressure when you draw loose? Maybe.
I don't know if it's that, or it's just, if you draw several lines, you have a better chance of finding the right one.
That's true.
Just because you have more to choose from.
Yeah, I like to think about the marks we make as unique to ourselves. And some of us have, I'm thinking of, let's see, I think there was an artist whose last name was Van Dyck, who was a contemporary of Rembrandt. And he was well known for having a smooth, curvilinear, elegant line, different than the way Rembrandt drew. And we can recognize their drawings from their marks that they make. So if you've got a nervous line, that's okay. Use it. That's part of your handwriting, so to speak, with regards to your artwork.
Okay, so we've almost got one horn in place. There's lots of things happening here on the horn. I'm going to try to make the edge appear a little bit rougher here. And there's lots of little nuances and value that happen there, but I just don't think I'm going to have the time to go in there and capture all of them. So at least we've got a horn in place. We'll go over to the second one here. And again, it's going to be about the same height as this one, as the part in the hair, the part in the horn. And then it comes down pretty quickly, it looks like. And actually comes behind the head a little bit. And the bottom of it kind of lines up with the eye. So again, I'm just continuing to make comparisons.
So you're using what you've already drawn to help guide what you have to draw next.
Exactly. And I'm making the decision to go out a little bit further on this side than what I originally drew as where the horn ended, just making basically the horn a little bit thicker at the end here.
Yeah, I can see that now. I guess the head may be just slightly turned, and that one horn does appear to finish further from the center of the bull's head. So there's always, even when you're drawing with a pen, you can always make adjustments in mid-course corrections, I guess we'll say.
Yeah, and this is a deviation from the first measurements that I made, and I don't know if this is more accurate than what I had originally or less accurate, but it doesn't have to be perfect. It never has to be perfect. I'm just trying to think about the drawing itself and trying to make what I'm adding into the drawing make sense with everything else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the drawing's the goal, isn't it? You just want to make sure it all looks good together. Some of you have expressed that you're having some of the same kind of problems I'm having in the chat, where it'll freeze and then speed up and freeze a little bit. So I'm sorry about that, and hopefully that problem will work its way out.
Just so you guys know, that is something that's out of our control. Yeah. That is a YouTube thing, and if there's a lot of folks on YouTube or something like that, or there can be problems that arise everywhere.
Medical Advocate says the origin and insertion of muscles are important. If looking for realism, and I would totally agree with that. You know, the muscles do kind of overlap each other, and that's where you find those. Sometimes you'll find little valleys, crevices between the muscles. So I think that's a good comment. Thank you for that.
Okay, so I got about 20 minutes.
20 minutes, and you did a little talking in the beginning, so you probably are about halfway into your drawing from the time that you started really drawing.
That's not too bad. I feel like I can slow down a little bit. Now, after feeling like I had to go really fast.
That's a good comment, Matt. There was a question that kind of relates to that a little bit from Michael. Matt, is it hard for you to go from this to the live lesson?
Yeah, Ashley and I have talked about that, and the answer is yes. It's incredibly difficult, and there's more to it than just what we're drawing. I am running the boards. I've got a soundboard. I've got 2 different video switchers. There's a lot going on over here, and so I'm trying to think about all that stuff. And now I'm seeing that maybe I should just stood with my original horn width there on the left side. I don't know. It's not too bad, but he does look a little bit more like he's looking 3-dimensional or 3/4 view. Yeah, it's very difficult. It's difficult enough to be drawing anything live while people are watching you, especially when it's, if I was giving a science lecture or something like that, and I knew what I was talking about, let's assume, then that's one thing. There's a level of being nervous in that, and that's difficult on its own. But then when you're having to perform artistically, that's very difficult, and it's very different from like playing music or something like that, because I'm a musician. I have lots of experience playing live music in front of people, and all of that is practiced and rehearsed, and you know what's going to happen. You have a plan and all of that. With this, none of this is practiced and rehearsed. It is go time, and you have to hope everything works out and trust your own instincts as an artist, because you guys know with your own drawings, things happen that don't always work out when you're drawing and painting. So there's a lot going on here, and I appreciate that comment, because I think a lot of times people think when they're watching an artist draw or paint or whatever they're doing in their creation process, people assume that it's easy because they have experience or have done it for a long period of time. And it is easier when you do have experience, but it's still never easy. If I was playing you a song on the drums, I might mess up because I forget where I am in the song, or I drop a drumstick or something like that. That's not likely to happen, but it could happen. But with this, there's tons of places where I could make errors, and I'm making plenty of errors. The drawing's not going to look exactly like the photo. There's going to be proportional issues. There's going to be shapes that are off, values that are off, and so on. But I could make catastrophic mistakes during this process, especially since I'm using a pen without any pencil directly on the paper. So, this is pretty nerve-wracking, and it is difficult. But your original question was, is it difficult to slow down and change how I'm applying the medium when I go to the live lesson? And the answer to that is yes, it is. But it's not as hard as you think it might be, because it's still drawing, and I'm still looking at the subject as I draw it. I just, with the live lesson series that we're doing right now, I get to slow down. I don't have a time constraint. I can, draw at my normal pace and really analyze the values and the shapes and so on. And with this, I'm under the gun. I'm having to work very quickly, and it's different. It's a different kind of mindset. I would say the live lessons are definitely easier on my heart than the Gettin Sketchy is. But but it is hard nonetheless. Now, if I was using a completely different medium, I would say that is probably a little bit harder to switch. So if I was doing watercolor painting right now for the live lesson series, I think that would be a harder mindset switch. But we are doing drawing right now, even though it is a graphite drawing. So that's a little bit easier of a shift.
Oh, I like those dark marks going in under the mouth now.
Yeah, this is all
good.
about contrast here. It really is. Those shadows are dark, and some of them are up against some light values.
Got about 15 minutes.
Oh, that just made me feel so good. It feels like I now have light ears. So I can start developing a little bit more of the form on the face here, even though I still have to add the ears.
Yeah, we got to get those ears in there in some fashion. And, not all of your drawings out there don't have to be finished to the same level in every square inch. One of the ways we create emphasis and a focal point sometimes is through a level of detail. And so you can have more details where you want people to look first and less details where you want their eyes to wander to eventually. And in that way, you kind of control the eyes of the viewer and the speed at which they take in your drawing.
And, I think we talked about this a few weeks ago, but an artist who really did a good job with that was Sargent, John Seymour Sargent.
Yeah. Yes, he didn't make my list, but
he was in my top 10.
I think he was on my list, and I took him off, put him back on, and took him off again. I think I eventually swapped him out with Courbet.
He was in your top 10, though.
Well, yeah, he was in my top 10, for sure. So I guess we can talk a little bit about our medium for next week, in case you want to follow along.
Oh, yeah.
So far, let's see, we've used graphite. We've used, in this season of Gettin Sketchy, we've used new pastels, oil pastels, ballpoint pen.
We haven't used oil pastels.
We haven't used oil pastels. No. We only thought about using oil pastels. We used graphite on bead paper, which was an extremely different look, especially for graphite. I actually loved that paper, and I can't wait to do a drawing on it myself. So we want to keep, sometimes showcasing a variety of materials. And I have a favorite material that I use, and it is oil-based block printing ink. I like to sketch in oil-based block printing ink, and I'm not the first, of course. It's called a monoprint. I might have mentioned that a couple of weeks ago. It's been on my mind. I haven't done a monoprint in several years. It is the only, as far as I know, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's the only printmaking process that was developed in Italy. And you can do it with a printing press, but you don't have to have a printing press. You just have to be willing to put a lot of pressure on your sketch afterwards. So if you're interested in following along, the medium is a little more difficult to acquire than is a ballpoint pen. You probably don't have any oil-based block printing ink in the junk drawer in your kitchen, like you might have a whole plethora of pens. So between now and next week, if you'd like to secure some oil-based block printing ink, you can do that. And then you would need a smooth surface to roll it out on. So again, this next Gettin Sketchy could be a little prohibitive for some because there's some specific materials that you would need. A brayer for rolling ink, the ink itself. And then what I'm going to be using for my surface to roll my ink on is not a traditional printing plate like an etching or engraving plate, usually made out of copper or zinc. I'm going to use plexiglass. Plexiglass is a great medium for monoprinting because it's clear, but you can back it with a white piece of paper and better see what you're doing. So the materials I'll use next week are oil-based block printing ink, a brayer, a piece of plexiglass, and then a piece of paper to print on. That's a lot of P's in there. And probably I'll just use some available watercolor paper. It should work fine. I don't have any block printing paper right now. Matt, do you have block printing paper at the moment?
I have Stonehenge 100% cotton paper, which is great for printmaking.
I'll
so
be
that
using
might be
Stonehenge paper next week. That's fantastic. That's what I used to print on years ago anyway. But watercolor paper will work well. You just want a paper that'll soak up some water. So a paper maybe that has, is made of cotton rather than wood pulp. and then we'll see how it goes. And I have very low expectations. I don't mind telling you. So if you're not going to follow along, you might want to tune in just to see whether or not it's a train wreck.
So if you forget those materials, remember that this live broadcast is recorded,
Sure.
and then it'll be up on YouTube within minutes of us being finished. So you can go back and find those materials. And again, that is plexiglass, oil-based block printing ink. And can you order that off of Amazon, Ashley?
Sure. Yeah, you can.
And some printing paper that can be watercolor paper or any paper that's 100% cotton, preferably.
The hardest part may be just rolling, getting a hold of a brayer.
Yeah,
something
brayer.
to thinly roll your ink
Now,
into your plexiglass
if they don't have a
plate.
brayer, can they use a wooden spoon?
To spread the ink?
Oh, yeah, then never
No,
mind. You can't do
probably
it.
not.
I'm thinking of...
I will be using a wooden spoon to make the print, to
Yeah.
press onto the back of the page or back of the paper with. So I didn't mention that. You'll need a wooden spoon. And you could use something else, but a wooden spoon is ideal for adding pressure to the back of the paper. The back of the plate to make the print. It kind of concentrates your pressure into a small area, so you don't have to press quite as hard. But it's a great process. And the reason I guess it's appropriate for Gettin Sketchy is it's actually a process you have to do kind of fast anyway. The entire process is a sketch. You're sketching in ink. It's a reduction process.
Now, they also need a rag too, right?
Well, I was going to say you need something to wipe with. So yeah, that could be a rag. Sometimes I just use a rag around one of my fingers. I use Q-tips. You can use a hard tool like a wooden skewer for shish kebabs and actually make small fine marks in the ink as well.
Okay, I'm going to add a little bit of a design element here. So I'm going to bring down a line and just give it a little bit of an edge here so our head doesn't look like it's completely floating.
Okay, the chat just jumped. Sorry, man, I don't mean to interrupt.
Oh, that's
you.
okay.
It was frozen and now it just scrolled again, and there's a lot of questions on there. So we'll see if we can squeeze some more in. How did you decide on the buffalo? I did a painting of one a couple of years ago, and that was from, let's see, Feathercraft Kayaks. Thank you.
Well, I start my search with an idea, and I actually started, my original idea was to, and we might do this for a future episode of Getting Sketchy, was to do an insect with oil pastels. And then I kind of deviated from that and thought, well, let's see what other interesting animals are out there. And I just started searching for images. I start with a very general search, and if I see a subject that I think looks interesting, then I just dive a little deeper into it. Mm-hmm. And then when I find an image that I think is going to work, then I start thinking about what medium might work with it. And originally, when I saw this image, it kind of replaced my idea of doing the ladybug. And I also thought it was going to be a little bit tight. That was the insect that I was going to do with the oil pastels. I thought it was going to be a little bit tight for the 45 minutes. I did finish it within 45 minutes. I did a little test study, but it was just barely within 45 minutes. And I thought there was no way I was going to be able to do it. And it was really small too. My test image was small. So I thought it might be a little bit tight. Still want to do something with oil pastels for Getting Sketchy, but so that took me to the Cape buffalo, and I just thought it was an interesting looking animal because of its wonderful haircut it has.
Right,
here.
Somebody just commented on that awesome hairstyle. Right.
And then I thought, well, what medium do I think will work well with this? And initially I thought of graphite, and then I thought I wanted more contrast than what I get with graphite, because this image is very contrasty. And that's why I decided ballpoint pens, even though I haven't used ballpoint pens to draw with in a long time. And I actually just went out and bought these pens today at the drugstore. Like I said, didn't even have ballpoint pens sitting around here. And that's how we got to this point.
But I'm glad you did, because some people are restricted, their movements, depending on where you're at in the world, you may be on some sort of a lockdown, or you may have locked yourself down due to COVID, and you just have to be creative and use what you've got. And so ballpoint pen is a great example of using a medium that's not always, wasn't designed for art making, but doesn't mean you can't use it.
Now there are some folks out there doing amazing drawings with ballpoint pen, create super hyper realistic drawings with ballpoint pen, and I can see how that's possible on a large surface with this medium, because you can see, I mean, if I slowed down a little bit, I could create gradations of value in here without using all the lines. I could really, really, really layer these applications, create some wonderful grays and so on in here. But I'll come back to that in a minute if I need to, but I need to finish this ear. But this is I can organize my thoughts. This is a medium that's really fun to work with, and it's accessible, like Ashley said, and it does have some great contrast, and it's smooth.
It's a unique medium, and it actually, like you said, it feels good to draw with it because of that smooth rolling of the ball on the paper. I agree.
And it is rather forgiving. You can be pretty loose with your marks. And speaking of being,
I really like what you did with the dark shadow along the neck, kind of bleeding down out of the dark side of the face.
Thanks. Yeah, it needed that.
It sure did. It really needed that.
Some design element. Without it, you are just a floating animal with a feathered haircut from 1987.
I was trying to think of the decades where parting your hair down the middle was most popular, and I think it's the 20s and the 80s. That's what I think. That's what I'm on.
He could be a gangster.
He could be a Chicago gangster.
I'm just enhance the line quality a little bit around these horns because they're so cool.
Matt, you must talk with Melody about sports, because she mentioned you should add a Panthers sports cap to your buffalo there.
Well, I should, since they won on Sunday. Yeah, that's right. They're not at the bottom of the NFC South. Not right now, anyway.
Oh, that's a small victory.
That belongs to the Atlanta Falcons out there. So all you dirty birds can just deal with that for a little while.
Hosem, I see your comment. You are not banned. I'm not sure what's been happening in the chat, and I know it's been frustrating for some of you guys. I can see that out there. So you are not banned. And thank you for trying to chat this week. And hopefully the chat roll will scroll a little smoother next week.
You know, it's always something, isn't it, with the live feeds. It's always something. You know, tonight I'm really trying my best to not push the wrong button, to not have errors that are usually caused by me happen here. And of course, when that all falls into place, then we have problems with the chat box, which is out of our control.
Can't necessarily control, but that's the magic and beauty of live TV, right? There's always a glitch to look for.
Yeah, there's always something. But it doesn't matter. You guys are getting to experience.
Stephen Abramson asked, "Can you please share a link to the reference picture?"
That's
possible?
That's a good point. I will do that next week. I didn't do it this week. I didn't think about it, but that is a good idea. I should do that. This image is on Pixabay. It's from Pixabay. And all you have to do is search for Cape Buffalo. And I should point out that I've edited this photo. So I can't even give you a link.
It's cropped down.
Yeah, I've cropped it down. I've also taken the color out of it. I've enhanced the contrast. I do that with pretty much all the references I use. I bring them into Photoshop and I enhance them. And I know that not everyone likes to use Photoshop or has access to Photoshop, but we do have a course called Basic Photoshop for Artists that covers basically the things that you need to know to use Photoshop as an artist. So that includes enhancing photos, laying grids over the top of images, enhancing your artwork or making your artwork look like it should when you photograph it, and so on. It's designed for artists. And of course,
great point.
That's part of our membership program there. But so if you want to check that out, but I do edit all the photos for the most part. There's probably some photos I haven't edited, but most of them, I do edit them and make them so that they are as optimal as they can be for me to draw or paint them. All right, so there's a lot of grays in here, And right now, the last thing I'm going to try to do here with 1 minute and 33 seconds
1 minute.
is try to make this right side of the head a little bit darker so that we can feel that light a little bit more.
Mhm. And now that you're deep into the drawing, you know you're not going to be making a mistake. You know you won't be going too dark.
Right. I've got some values in place so I can make comparisons.
Mm-hmm.
Although this area right here needs to be a little bit darker. All these animals that we draw here have these wonderful expressions on their face.
I
It
did
feels like.
the unlovable bird last week, so I think this animal's a little more lovable.
I think the animal that I drew that has the most personality was an ostrich for a live lesson series that we called Birdie. She just looked like she was ticked off and she was mad at somebody, like somebody her better half ostrich had said something and that had thrown her off.
You know, the only time ostriches make the news is when they're chasing somebody on safari because they run so fast. And so they may be angry animals. The ones that I've seen are usually pretty angry.
Maybe they are. But we gave Birdie a little bit more personality. She seemed a little bit happier in the final drawing. Okay, I'm pretty sure my time's up. Just went off.
Oh, yeah. Time's up. Sorry.
Okay, so I'm just going to make one more final adjustment and make this eye a little bit darker over here. And maybe make this one a little bit darker, even though it's not.
Matt thinks the timer is a suggestion.
It is a suggestion. I make the rules around here. All right, so there we go. Now it's finished. It's gonna have to be finished. But I really enjoyed. Well, it's not finished quite yet.
It's hard to stop.
It is hard to stop because I see so many different values I could pull out. There's a lot of different variety of values in the horns, even and in the body here. But I really enjoyed working with the ballpoint pens. You can still see the lines that I sketched out initially, and it's not a big deal that those are there. And the ballpoint pen, as I mentioned, creates a lot of contrast, much like the charcoal we saw last week with your drawing. Had the nice rich blacks that you can't, or it's very difficult to get with graphite, because graphite is a gray material, or a gray medium. So pretty happy with the end result here.
Yeah, nice sketch. And the proportions look really good.
All right. So is there any other questions here before we switch back out?
There may be, but the chat roll has not moved in probably a 5 or 6 minutes. So if you've got more questions, I hope you'll join us at the live lesson.
Yeah, that's true. So sorry that the chat box has not been kind to everyone tonight. I don't know if that's because we had a lot of people tonight or if YouTube is just glitching up or whatever. But if it's happening to you and it's happening to us, it's probably something going on with YouTube. And that's not unusual. Anything that's online is susceptible to lots of traffic and server issues and all kinds of stuff. I experienced some of that on my own website earlier this week. So it's not unusual. It's just par for the course. So apologize that the chat box was a little bit staggery, but hopefully in the replay, it will pick up everything, all of the comments that you guys have made. But anyway, just want to remind you that next week we're going to be continuing on with this season, and Ashley's going to be doing the monoprint. Ashley, you want to remind them of the materials?
Yeah, you're going to need some oil-based block printing ink. You just need a small tube because a little goes a really, really long way. It may come in like 2 ounces or a 3.5 ounce tube. And then I'm going to be working on a piece of plexiglass that is about 5 by 6 inches or so, not crazy big. I'll be using Stonehenge Stonehenge block printing paper.
Well, it's just Stonehenge paper.
Okay,
yeah.
Stonehenge rag paper. It's made of cotton. And then you'll need some wiping tools. I'll be using Q-tips and rags mostly, and then maybe a sharp tool just to make some thin marks into the ink. All right. And then if you have a brayer, that's great too. I don't remember who it was, but somebody in the chat mentioned that you can get away with using some black oil paint in place of the block printing ink. So I haven't done that myself, but I can see it's a heavy-bodied material and it's also oil-based, so we could give that a try too.
Yeah, I don't see why that wouldn't work.
I don't think so. You give it a try and then tell us how it comes out in the chat.
Yeah, so make sure that you get oil-based ink or
Right.
use oil paint, because if you use a water-based paint, it's going to dry on the plexiglass and it won't
That's right.
work. So, so anyway, it should be fun. I'm interested to see what happens
And
next week.
I'll go ahead and tell everyone I'm removing it, but the look of a monoprint is a little bit like a charcoal drawing, even though it's kind of a mystery why it looks that way when it's over, because it's a wet medium and one is a dry medium. So you get away with that and still create the same look.
All right, you want to say goodnight?
Yeah, I'll see you guys. Good night.
All right, with that, we're going to go ahead and sign out. Remember, if you're already a member, join us over at thevirtualinstructor.com, where we're going to be continuing the graphite drawing of my daughter. We're almost finished. Got probably 2 more lessons, including tonight. And if you're not a member, you can check out our program. There's a link in the description below. Everyone starts out with a free trial. And also, you can check out 3 of our course videos and ebooks for free. Again, there's a link to that below. And next week, we're going to have a lot of fun doing a monoprint. It should be just as exciting as the ballpoint pen drawing, because it is live.
Yeah, it's possible. It's possible that I'll work on a plexiglass plate for 45 minutes and then nothing happens. So that would be disappointing. So tune in for that.
But that's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen.
He's going to work for at least 40 minutes, and then he's going to make a print. And then just on cue, here comes all of
the
the
chat
comments.
roll's moving
And
now.
Melody, of course, remembers the ostrich there. But unfortunately, we have to sign out because we have to get ready for our next live broadcast. So with that, we're going to go ahead and sign out for this evening. I hope you guys have a great and safe week, and we'll see you next week at the same time.